Void Bastards is one of this week's free games on the Epic Store, a roguelike created by Blue Manchu. They are a group of devs from the team behind System Shock 2 and the Bioshock games. Story-wise, you're an inmate on a prison ship called the Ark. In this universe, people are dehydrated into a powder and then rehydrated to bring them back to life. Don't ask why, just go with it. In this way, your character can die and you will respawn as a new character who has been rehydrated. The story exists as a reason for you completing missions, but really it's nudged off to the side other than that. The AI on the Ark brings you back to carry out these tasks to reactivate the Ark due to various damage it has taken. As you might expect, each time you fix one thing, something else is broken, and the game does not take itself seriously and makes fun of the fact that it follows this very standard adventure trope. That said, the voice acting and script of the AI is quite amusing at times. The story sections are told through comic book strips, which is not necessarily a bad way to go. It certainly worked for Max Payne. Speaking of which, when are we getting a remake of that? Gameplay is effectively go here, fetch this to build this. Along the way you'll also find junk to turn into materials to create other components, and then you can use these to build new weapons, do upgrades, or indeed progress through the story. You spend most of your time on a smaller craft called the Stev as you go from ship to ship. On the various ships you will find food and fuel, both of which you need to stay alive and keep moving. Merits will also drop, which is the in-game currency, and that is needed for unlocking containers as well as having a few other uses. Ships will also have oxygen points, another thing you will need to keep an eye on. Certain ships will also have additional bonus rooms such as warp rooms or med bays, etc. And I'll leave that to your imagination as what those might be for. You jump from point to point, and most of these locations are other ships within the nebula void where you are all trapped. There are a variety of designs of ship, and it does appear to be randomized each time you go onto one. However, there are several set themes which relate to the company that owns them, so you can kind of know what to expect as you go in. There are also various other points such as shops you can dock at, or space mines that can be good or bad. And if that was not enough for you, there are also random other events that can occur as you move around the map, because other ships, including pirate ships, will also move around the points. Pirates are hard as nails, by the way, though you can find torpedoes to blow up their ship before you have to land on one of the other ships with them. Each ship you land on will have resources, enemies, security systems and components. Also, they will have their own additional modifiers, such as all the doors being locked, power being out, more enemy spawns. The list goes on, but you get the idea. There are good modifiers and there are bad modifiers. There is a nice wide variety of enemies, which for once in a game are mostly unique in their attacks, movement and response to seeing you or being attacked by you, which makes you have to think hard about the types of tactics you're going to use when combating them or avoiding them, as the case may be. And for some, I actually found myself trying to, for example, lock them in a room just to avoid having to fight them. This is indeed a first-person shooter, though it doesn't play like a standard first-person shooter. Gunplay is mediocre at best, though I guess it kind of fits with the style of the game overall. I will note, however, that aiming was a bit frustrating at times because your character won't necessarily aim right in the middle of the crosshair. Sometimes they just miss for the sake of it. Sadly, because of the design style of the game, the weapons don't provide much satisfying feedback when you fire them, and while there are a lot of weapons to choose from, some are just there for variety and for filling up the list, and thus are fairly useless in actual combat. For example, the cluster flak, which has such a massive timer on its explosives, you've pretty much moved on or died by the time they actually explode. You can upgrade it to lower that timer, but it's just not worth it. You can take 3 items with you, a main slot weapon, a secondary weapon, and some kind of support weapon. I found the mainstay weapons for me to be the pistol that you start with, or the Riveter, which is a machine gun you get later, the Spiker, which is a poison dart gun, and the Zapper, which is a stun gun. There are certainly other weapons that have their uses for taking out bigger targets. There will also be times you want to take explosives with you, depending on what enemies are on the ships. And eventually you do get the ability to mind control enemies on the ships as well. The reality is, the game is half opening things to get resources and components or ammo, and half combat, with maybe 1% of your time spent crafting just for good measure. It does not pretend to be anything else, and it certainly won't be for everyone. As noted previously, you can die. If you die, you lose your ammo, food, fuel, merits, and materials. However, you keep all the items that have already been created, and you will get a care package when your new character spawns. However, the Stev will return to the starting point of the Nebula depth based on story progression, which could be quite annoying if you die on the last ship of that section trying to get the item you need to complete it. The only other real punishing thing is that when you get a new character, it will get new traits, which could be good or bad. Sometimes a big skill in this game is knowing when to just leave the ship and save your life. It is not always worth trying to loot everything or risking dying and losing your good traits. There are both random events and also certain ships which allow you to change one of your traits. That doesn't necessarily mean that it will be a good change. However, the nice thing is there is a difficulty slider which you can change on the fly, it seems, so if it's proving too difficult, at least you can turn things down. The game, depending on how you play it and how often you die, could be completed in perhaps 6 hours, but I would say that an average of about 10 hours if you're dying a bit like I did. Though honestly, by the end of the game you have so much health it's very hard to die. Graphically, the game is nothing special. It strives to stick to its comic book theme with a cel-shaded look. The result is that it does not look terrible, but it does not look great either. Weapon effects are so-so, though most of the time it's easy at least to tell the different weapon fire apart, which is nice. The music is fine, nothing that sticks in your mind but pleasant enough during gameplay. Sound effects again are alright and they're clear enough so that you know what's going on, and sound cues are important for spotting some of the enemies and some of the security systems in the game. And in fact, you'll probably use the sounds quite a lot before you go into a room to tell what enemy is in there. The voice acting is very well done and has a variety of mostly UK based accents. In summary, as with many roguelikes, the game can feel a bit punishing at times if you had got right to the end of that section, only to be pushed back. The game is also combat or looting for the most part, and the reality is the gameplay is very repetitive. The game has a lot of unlocks to get and a lot of achievements on other platforms, though I'm not sure Epic has these enabled on their store yet. So if you are a completionist, there is plenty to do, though you might miss the extra achievements like completing the game without dying once. Void Bastard gets a 3.5 out of 5 from me. It's fun to a point, but it gets a bit repetitive, and many of these games do. But sadly, the story is not entertaining enough to make you want to continue for any other reason than you just want to complete the game. While having weapon variety is nice, it would have been good for all the weapons to have a solid use, rather than some seemingly just there to flesh out the list, but being rather useless in combat. However, overall, it was reasonably entertaining to a point, and the fact that the enemies were so varied in their tactics at least made you have to think about combat a little bit. Void Bastards is free this week on the Epic Store until the 26th of August. It's not a massive download and I would highly recommend giving it a go while it's free. Thanks for watching everyone. Let me know what you guys think of the game down below. In particular, which weapons do you tend to take on most ships? Please smash that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you all soon for the next free game on Epic.